What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and today we're going to be discussing EIP-37, which is for the Ergo blockchain and to adjust the difficulty adjustment algorithm that is currently being used on it. I have gotten some clarification from Armenio within Telegram to make sure that I have everything reported on properly, and I can give you guys the most up-to-date information. Now, the precursor to all of this needs to be that this iteration of the EIP is currently being tested, and it could change given, of course, results of the testing and so on. So this is by no means the end-all be-all way it's going to be for the difficulty adjustment algorithm on Ergo. However, the main point of this is that they are working on fixing the current issue. Now, another note about this in general that I find extremely interesting is that the initial change would have to be a hard fork, and this means that you could see potentially, depending on how the tests go, a reset of the difficulty at the time of the hard fork, which would actually kind of be needed, because if this was implemented in the way that it currently is written and the difficulty remained the same and it had to go through the adjustment process, once the EIP was applied, if the hard fork didn't readjust the difficulty, you would be having a 2-week wait time before this was adjusted. So what is this in general? Well, as you can see here, I have it pulled up on GitHub. I will have it linked down below. Kushti has proposed it. Like you see here, a hard fork would be needed. He initially goes on to discuss, of course, how the difficulty adjustment works on Bitcoin, the changes that were done on Ergo to prevent pool hopping, and then here we have the proposed changes. The number one proposed change is the epoch length will be set to 128 blocks. Now, why is this relevant? Well, currently the epoch length is set to 1,024 blocks, and you basically have to wait every 8 epochs for a difficulty adjustment. That means currently, with the typical average time on a properly functioning Ergo network, you would see 2 minutes per block, which would equate to about 11 to 14 days, 2 weeks essentially. The change that is being proposed will actually take that down significantly to an eighth of what the current time for a difficulty adjustment is. So from 1,024 blocks and 8 epochs to 128 blocks and 8 epochs, equating to, of course, a total of 1,024 blocks before a difficulty adjustment. Now, like I said, if it was based on the current difficulty adjustment, the problem here would have been that your first change would take 8 days, excuse me. So why is that? Well, that's because the block times are, of course, super long. They're up to 11 minutes on average right now. And that means that essentially you would have to wait 8 days for the first change. Now, that gets even more complicated from a mathematical perspective if we talk about the limits. Now, to make sure that the difficulty doesn't spike up really high or drop down really low unexpectedly, there is a proposal to put a 50% limit per epoch on the difficulty change. Now, my understanding of that would be essentially going to be that you would see it, for example, right now go down from 21p to 10.5p. Now, that would mean if it was implemented right now, you could see up to a 12-day waiting period. Now, I did ask Armenio in, of course, Telegram to kind of confirm some of this math. It is confirmed. I do still have some questions, though, because I think that the readjustment takes place like I said, every 1,024 blocks if this EIP went into play. And that would mean, like I said, up to 12 days for a change if the current difficulty was taken into account with the current amount of hash rate on the network. But the caveat there is that they are testing, of course, changing that difficulty as part of the hard fork, which would get rid of this, and then you would have the new difficulty set. So the theory behind, of course, the actual difficulty adjustment doesn't change. just the length of time between the difficulty adjustments, pretty much, right? As it sits in the current EIP. If there is someone out there that sees a problem with this and you want to submit, an issue with it, of course, make sure you go down to the GitHub and hit the issues button and submit your issues for it. Okay. That's what you can do. Is this the end all be all for, the problem that Ergo is facing? No, like I said, this could be modified here. And they are talking about a potential cold start as well. What would a cold start look like? Well, a cold start would essentially mean, starting that difficulty after the hard fork at 0 and then letting the difficulty adjust up from there. Of course, problem being there, at least from my perspective, which I would probably bring up with them, is that a cold start, when we have a whole bunch of hash rate that we don't know where it went and what's happening with it, could potentially cause some initial issues, but the adjustment happening faster should prevent that to a certain extent. I just don't want to see a repeat of the problem due to the fact that we aren't sure how much hash rate is really floating around and ready to just turn back onto the network. And this could be a tricky situation. So, the EIPs are being tested. The other thing that comes into play here is, the governance is that miners will have to vote on it. That means you and me, potentially, if we go through GetBlock, which is what I would recommend, because GetBlock will hopefully allow you to vote on it. If you're mining through any other pool, the pool itself will vote on it. So, for example, 2 miners vote will be weighted by the amount of hash rate that is on 2 miners, which I think at this point would pretty much take the whole vote up. At this time. So there's some tricky situations as far as that is concerned. We'll just have to stay tuned and see what happens. Thanks for watching today. If you find anything wrong with my interpretation of this EIP in its current status, please let me know in the comment section below. Oh, and just to note, of course, in a perfect world where this is actually functioning properly, the change in difficulty would happen every day and a half at 2-minute block times. There we go. I'll see you next Tuesday. For additional content that also goes into more opinionated pieces surrounding the politics around crypto, make sure you check out sonofatech.locals.com. There you can become a member for free or even choose to support for basically additional content at $5 a month. It's helping me stay alive through the crypto winter.